Riot games came late to the survivors like bullet heaven genre. And when I say late, I mean more than their usual lateness. In the past, being late to the party was not such a big deal. When their model was free to play and a look of polish, it could drive people away from other choices that were a little bit harder to get into. The problem is that this genre has had at least 2 years of saturation, where there was much exploration, even in how enemies behave, how enemies are made, or how the environment responds to player movement and choices. The new Swarm game is like looking back 2 years in time, when Vampire Survivors first jumped onto the scene and made waves. Outside of player cast abilities, and therefore bosses tied to their in-game champions, it brings nothing of significance to the table. For more interesting ways the genre has been explored, you can watch a lovely video aptly named "The Vampire Survivor like genre has gotten out of hand." I would say that the gameplay is not bad. There is little to mess up over something reminiscent of an AFK game. It is something to pass the time and give you some satisfaction from leveling up constantly. I do have problems with how the system works outside of the game, the difficulty of the maps or progression, and how maps work with bosses. Your first roadblock probably comes in at about 90 minutes when you reach the third map. For some reason, the time needed to grind through this one is just as much as the other three combined. If the enemies were different and your choices of how to deal with them as a result of the map to change, that would be one thing. But all this is a claustrophobic mess that forces you to deal more damage than other maps. Your next roadblock is unlocking enough upgrades to progress through the difficulty too. Your best choices are grinding through all the text mission and weapon champion combinations for your augment reward mission pool, or to simply queue up for a random 4-person co-op that will reward you with enough gold to buy out most stat upgrades in about 2 or 3 hours. Neither one lets you explore the game at your own pace, as by the time that you are able to beat all 4 level 2 difficulty maps, the hard mode, there is nothing that could feel new in the game to you, onto the bosses. You get to the boss, you're more than likely to beat it. The waves of monsters before a boss are more threatening than the boss itself. Outside of Aatrox 3, the final boss, who is pretty much the only champion whose mechanics or damage per second check could catch you off guard, the glimmer of something that could make maps more fun goes. But in my mind it's misused. It has 2 phases, and it hints that putting a boss phase halfway into the map might breathe life into an otherwise dull 15 minutes. Because, let's be honest, all you're really doing during the 15 minutes is having a stat check. Elites are just a movement check, and mob density is just trying to have enough damage. There really is nothing exciting about this rendition of a 2-year-old game, which is impossible to watch, as even the person playing it is usually doing something on a second monitor, and whose co-op nature makes the game harder to play due to lag and screen clutter. It screams out, more than any of the previous game modes that Riot Games has put out into League of Legends, as something used to show off fancy new skins in hopes that it leads to a sale.